Welcome to the Sleep Story Haven, your peaceful sanctuary where the whispers of ancient forests meet the gentle rhythm of moonlit shores. Here, time slows to the rhythm of your breathing. Worries dissolve like mist, and your mind finds the peace it's been seeking. Each story is crafted to guide you through enchanted landscapes and tranquil moments, designed to quiet your thoughts and prepare your spirit for deep, restorative sleep. So find your most comfortable position, close your eyes, and let tonight's gentle tale carry you to the peaceful dreams that await. Welcome to your Sleep Story Haven. Take a deep breath and let our story begin. The Celestial Journey, a sleep story of Chinese mythology. Chapter 1: The Weary Seeker. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world held its breath between sleeping and waking, there lived a soul named Lin, who carried the weight of countless restless nights. Lin wandered through life with tired eyes and a heart that yearned for something indefinable, a peace that seemed to dance just beyond reach, like moonlight on water. Each evening, Lin would climb to the highest hill in their village, where an ancient temple stood weathered and wise against the sky. The temple's curved roofs swept upward like wings, and its walls held centuries of prayers whispered by those who, like Lin, sought solace in the embrace of something greater than themselves. The incense that burned there carried the dreams of generations, curling upward in silver spirals that seemed to write secrets in the air. On this particular night, as autumn painted the world in shades of gold and crimson, Lin sat on the temple steps and gazed up at the star-scattered sky. The moon hung full and luminous, its light so pure it seemed to wash away the harsh edges of the day. A gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine and chrysanthemums from the temple gardens, where koi fish moved like living jewels through lotus-covered pools. "I am so tired," Lin whispered to the night, and the words seemed to echo not just in the air, but in every fiber of their being. It was a tiredness that went deeper than muscles and bones, deeper than the simple need for sleep. It was the exhaustion of a spirit that had forgotten how to truly rest, how to sink into the profound peace that comes when one surrenders to the great flowing river of existence. As Lin spoke these words, something remarkable began to happen. The night air shimmered with an opalescent quality, as if the very atmosphere was responding to their deepest need. The stars seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched the beating of Lin's heart, and the moon's light grew softer, more intimate, wrapping around them like a silk blanket woven from dreams. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of wind chimes, their crystalline notes dancing on the breeze like fallen stars transformed into music. The The sound was so pure, so perfectly attuned to the frequency of peace, that Lin felt their breathing naturally slow and deepen. Each exhale carried away a fragment of tension. Each inhale drew in something precious and healing. The temple itself seemed to respond to this moment of vulnerability and openness. The ancient wood creaked softly, as if the building were settling into a more comfortable position, and the painted dragons on the eaves appeared to move slightly in the moonlight, their serpentine forms flowing like water frozen in time. The guardian lions at the entrance seemed to relax their eternal vigil, their stone faces softening into expressions of benevolent watching over this seeker who had dared to voice their deepest need. Lin closed their eyes and felt themselves becoming part of the night's gentle symphony. The distant sound of a bamboo flute floated on the air, its melody simple and repetitive, like a lullaby that had been sung since the beginning of time. The music seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, as if the very molecules of air had learned to sing. In this state of deepening relaxation, Lin began to notice things they had never perceived before. The warmth of the stone steps seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if the earth itself had a heartbeat. The scent of night-blooming flowers grew more intense, more complex, revealing layers of fragrance that spoke of hidden gardens and secret groves, where time moved differently than in the waking world. The sound of their own breathing became a meditation, each inhalation a small prayer, each exhalation a gentle release. Lin felt their body beginning to soften, muscles unwinding from positions they had held for so long they had forgotten they were tense. Their shoulders dropped, their jaw relaxed, and their hands uncurled from fists they hadn't realized they were making. As this physical release continued, Lin became aware of a presence nearby, not threatening or demanding, but patient and kind, like a friend who had been waiting quietly for exactly this moment. The presence seemed to emanate from the temple itself, or perhaps from the ancient trees that surrounded it, their branches reaching toward the stars like arms raised in eternal praise. The wind picked up slightly, carrying with it the distant sound of temple bells from somewhere far away. The bells rang slowly, deliberately, each tone clear and pure as mountain water. The sound seemed to resonate not just in Lin's ears, but in their chest, their belly, their very bones. It was as if the bells were calling to something deep within them, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Lin opened their eyes and found that the world had transformed. The moonlight was brighter now, casting everything in silver and pearl. The temple gardens glowed with an inner light, and the koi pond reflected the stars so perfectly it was impossible to tell where the water ended and the sky began. The boundary between earth and heaven seemed to have dissolved, leaving only beauty and peace. In this moment of wonder, Lin heard a voice, soft as silk, gentle as rain on leaves. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the wind in the trees, from the ripples on the pond, from the very stones of the temple itself. "Dear one," the voice said, and Lin felt their heart open like a flower greeting the dawn. "You have called out in your weariness, and we have heard you. There is a journey that awaits, a path that winds through realms where healing flows like rivers and peace grows like lotus flowers in still water. If you are willing to trust, to let go of the need to understand with your mind alone, we will guide you to the rest your soul has been seeking." Lin felt no fear, only a deep recognition, as if they had been waiting their entire life for this invitation. They nodded slowly, and as they did, the night air began to shimmer more intensely. Colors that had no names danced at the edges of their vision, and the sound of the wind chimes grew closer, more distinct, as if a procession of invisible musicians were approaching through the darkness. "Then come," the voice continued, and Lin felt themselves being gently lifted, not by physical hands, but by the night itself. The sensation was like floating on warm water or being cradled by clouds. "Let us begin this journey together, through the realms where the dragon kings hold court, where the Jade Emperor watches over all creation, and where the wisdom of ages waits to embrace you with the peace you seek." As Lin surrendered to this impossible, wonderful experience, they felt the last of their resistance melting away. The tiredness that had driven them to this hilltop was transforming into something else, not the heaviness of exhaustion, but the sweet gravity of a soul preparing to sink into the deepest, most restorative rest imaginable. The temple bells continued to ring, their sound growing more distant as Lin felt themselves being carried upward toward the star-filled sky. But the distance only made the bells' song more beautiful, more haunting, like a melody that would play in their dreams for all eternity. And so began the journey that would carry Lin through realms of wonder, where every step would bring deeper peace, every breath would carry healing, and every moment would be a gentle invitation to rest more completely than they had ever rested before. Chapter 2: The Realm of Gentle Mists. As Lin floated upward through the night air, cradled by invisible hands of starlight and moonbeams, the familiar world below grew small and dreamlike. The temple became a tiny jewel set in velvet darkness, its golden lights twinkling like fireflies. The village spread out like a constellation of gentle warmth, each window a small star holding the dreams of sleeping souls. But Lin felt no sense of loss or separation. Instead, there was only a growing feeling of expansion, as if their very being was becoming larger, more spacious, more capable of holding peace. The night wind carried them higher, and with each moment of ascent, another layer of tension dissolved from their body and spirit. Soon, they found themselves passing through veils of mist that felt like silk against their skin. These were not ordinary clouds, but something far more magical, vapors that shimmered with inner light, condensed from the breath of dragons and the sighs of celestial beings. The mist held a fragrance that was both familiar and exotic, like jasmine mixed with something indefinably precious. Perhaps the scent of pearls forming in the depths of sacred lakes. As they moved through these gentle clouds, Lin began to hear new sounds: the distant tinkle of jade chimes, the soft murmur of water flowing over smooth stones, and underneath it all, a rhythm like the breathing of the earth itself. The sounds were not loud or demanding, but subtle and soothing, like a lullaby sung by the universe itself. The mist began to part, revealing glimpses of a realm that existed between the mortal world and the heavens. Here, floating islands drifted slowly through the air, each one a perfect garden where ancient trees grew in impossible spirals, their branches heavy with flowers that glowed like captured starlight. Waterfalls cascaded from the edges of these islands. But instead of falling into empty space, the water transformed into streams of liquid light that flowed upward, nourishing the gardens of higher realms. Lin found themselves gently deposited on one of these floating sanctuaries, their feet touching ground that felt like silk cushions filled with the softest down. The island was covered in moss so green it seemed to pulse with life, and scattered throughout were pools of crystal clear water that reflected not the sky above, but scenes of profound peace, temples where monks meditated in perfect stillness, gardens where children played without worry, libraries where ancient wisdom waited patiently to be discovered. At the center of this garden island stood a pavilion made of materials that seemed to shift and flow like frozen music. The pillars were carved from jade that held the color of deep forest shade, and the roof was tiled with scales that might have come from the gentlest of dragons, each one catching and reflecting light in patterns that soothed the eye and calmed the mind. As Lin approached the pavilion, they saw that it was occupied by a figure of indescribable serenity. The being was neither entirely human nor entirely divine, but something perfectly balanced between the two. Their robes flowed like water, shifting between the colors of sky and sea, and their face held the ageless beauty of one who had long ago learned the secret of perfect peace. "Welcome, weary traveler," the figure said, and their voice was like the sound of wind through bamboo groves. I am the keeper of the gentle mists, guardian of this threshold between worlds. You have been carried here by your sincere desire for rest. And here you shall begin to learn the first lesson of true peace. Lin found themselves drawn forward without conscious decision, their feet carrying them up the steps of the pavilion as if they were walking on air. Inside, the space was larger than it appeared from outside, with walls that seemed to breathe with a gentle rhythm. Soft cushions were arranged around a low table made from a single piece of moonstone, its surface glowing with internal light. "Please sit," the keeper said, gesturing to the cushions. "Let your body remember what it feels like to be truly supported." As Lin settled onto the cushions, they felt themselves sinking into softness beyond description. It was as if the very atoms of their being were being gently rearranged into a more comfortable configuration. Their spine naturally aligned itself. Their breathing deepened, and their hands came to rest in positions that felt perfectly natural and right. The keeper moved to a small alcove where a tea set waited, not ordinary porcelain, but vessels that seemed to be made from crystallized dewdrops and captured moonbeams. The sound of tea being poured was like the whisper of rain on lotus leaves, and the steam that rose from the cups carried the essence of flowers that bloomed only in the gardens of paradise. "This tea is brewed from the leaves of the tree of tranquil dreams," the keeper explained, offering Lin a cup that was warm but never hot, glowing but never blinding. "Each sip will help you release another layer of the tiredness you have carried for so long. Drink slowly, and let each drop teach your body how to rest." Lin took the cup in hands that no longer trembled with exhaustion. The tea was like liquid serenity, each sip spreading warmth through their chest and belly melting tension they hadn't even known they were holding. The flavor was subtle and complex, hints of lotus blossom, notes of clear mountain springs, and an undertone of something that tasted like perfect contentment. As they drank, the keeper began to speak in a voice that was barely above a whisper. Yet every word was perfectly clear. "In the realms we are about to visit, you will meet beings of great power and wisdom. But you must understand, their power comes not from force or dominance, but from their perfect alignment with the natural flow of the universe. They rest in their strength, and their strength comes from their rest." The words seemed to settle into Lin's consciousness like seeds falling into perfectly prepared soil. They felt understanding dawning not in their mind, but in their body, in their breath, in the very rhythm of their heartbeat. This was not information to be grasped or analyzed, but wisdom to be absorbed and lived. "The dragon kings you will meet," the keeper continued, "are not fierce warriors, but guardians of the waters that nourish all life. They have learned to flow like the rivers they protect, to be powerful yet gentle, mighty yet peaceful. From them, you will learn how to let your own life force flow without resistance or strain. Lin nodded, feeling the truth of these words resonating in their bones. The tea continued to work its magic, each sip bringing deeper relaxation, until they felt as if they were dissolving into the very cushions that supported them. Nuwa, the mother goddess who will greet you in the realm of creation, will show you how to mend what has been broken in your spirit, not through effort or struggle, but through the gentle application of divine love. She will teach you that healing comes not from fighting against pain, but from surrounding it with such complete acceptance that it transforms naturally into peace. The keeper's words painted pictures in Lin's mind, images of a goddess with infinite compassion, hands that could reshape the very fabric of reality through touch as gentle as a mother's caress. Lin felt something deep in their chest beginning to unwind, a knot of old hurt that had been held so long it had become part of their identity. And the Jade Emperor, the keeper's voice grew even softer, more dreamy. He will show you the ultimate secret of authority that comes from perfect stillness. His power to govern all of heaven and earth comes not from commanding or controlling, but from being so perfectly at peace that all of creation naturally organizes itself around his tranquility. As these words were spoken, Lin felt their own need to control, to manage, to worry beginning to fade. The tea had done its work well, and they found themselves in a state of relaxation so complete that it was almost like being held in the arms of the universe itself. The keeper rose slowly, moving with the fluid grace of water flowing over stones. But that is still to come. For now, you must rest here in the gentle mists. Let your body and spirit absorb the peace of this threshold realm. Sleep will come to you here like a friend you have not seen for many years. And when you wake, you will be ready for the next stage of your journey. Lin felt their eyelids growing heavy, not with exhaustion, but with the sweet gravity of approaching sleep. The pavilion around them seemed to pulse gently with the rhythm of their breathing, and the mist outside swirled in patterns that were hypnotic and soothing. "Rest now," the keeper whispered, and their voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, like the memory of a lullaby. Let the gentle mists carry away all that you no longer need. Let your dreams be filled with the first glimpses of the peace that awaits you. As Lin's eyes closed, they felt themselves being covered by a blanket woven from moonbeams and starlight. The last thing they saw was the keeper's serene face, smiling with infinite compassion. And the last thing they heard was the sound of the jade chimes, playing a melody that seemed to echo in their very soul. Sleep came like a gentle tide, carrying Lin into depths of rest they had never known existed. And in their dreams, dragons swam through seas of liquid light, preparing to welcome a tired soul into the healing waters of their eternal domains. Chapter 3: The Court of the Dragon Kings. When Lin awakened, it was not to the harsh intrusion of alarm or urgency, but to the gentle sensation of warm water lapping against their skin. They found themselves floating in a pool of liquid crystal, each drop catching and reflecting light in patterns that seemed to dance with the rhythm of their heartbeat. The water was neither hot nor cold, but perfectly matched to their body temperature, so that they felt embraced rather than wet. Around them stretched a vast underwater palace that defied every law of physics Lin had ever known, despite being deep beneath the surface of a celestial sea. They could breathe as easily as if they were in mountain air. The water itself seemed to provide everything their lungs needed, each breath carrying not just oxygen, but peace itself into their bloodstream. The palace walls were made of coral that had grown in impossible spirals and fractals, each formation a living mandala that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Schools of fish swam through the corridors like living rivers of gold and silver, their movements so perfectly coordinated they seemed to be performing an ancient dance of worship. The fish moved in patterns that were mesmerizing to watch, their synchronized swimming creating currents that massaged Lin's floating form with gentle, healing pressure. Gardens of sea anemones swayed in the underwater currents, their fronds reaching toward ceiling gardens where kelp forests grew downward like hanging tapestries. Everything here moved with the slow, hypnotic rhythm of the deep ocean, and Lin felt their own internal rhythms beginning to match this ancient, eternal tempo. As they floated deeper into the palace, carried by currents that seemed to know exactly where they needed to go, Lin heard the sound of voices speaking in harmonies that were like whale song mixed with the resonance of temple bells. The voices were deep and rich, carrying the weight of centuries, yet they spoke with the gentle patience of those who had learned to measure time in eons rather than moments. The current carried Lin into a vast circular chamber where 4 thrones stood, each carved from a different precious material and positioned at one of the cardinal directions. The eastern throne was made of jade that held the green of spring forests. The southern throne blazed with coral that captured the warmth of summer suns. The western throne was carved from pearl that held the silver of autumn moons, and the northern throne was formed from sapphire that contained the deep blue of winter skies. Upon each throne sat a dragon king, beings of such magnificent presence that Lin felt no fear, only awe and a deep sense of being welcomed home. These were not the fierce, fire-breathing dragons of stories meant to frighten, but embodiments of the primal forces of nature in their most benevolent aspects. Each dragon king had achieved perfect mastery over their element, not through domination, but through such complete understanding and love that they had become one with the forces they governed. The Eastern Dragon King, Guanyin, spoke first, his voice like the sound of spring rain on new leaves. Welcome, child of the surface world, to the depths where healing flows like the eternal rivers. You have come to us carrying the burden of restless nights and days without peace. Here, in the realm of flowing water, you will learn the first secret of true rest. His scales shifted from emerald to jade to the deep green of forest shadows, and with each change of color, Lin felt something in their chest relaxing, as if their heart was learning a new rhythm from watching the play of light across the Dragon King's magnificent form. The secret, Guang continued, is to stop fighting the current. For too long, you have tried to swim against the flow of your own nature, exhausting yourself in battles that were never meant to be fought. Watch the water around you. See how it moves without effort, how it finds its way around every obstacle not through force, but through patience and persistence. As he spoke, the water in the chamber began to move in gentle spirals around Lin's floating form. The sensation was like being massaged by liquid silk, each current finding exactly the right spot to touch, the perfect pressure to apply. Lin felt knots of tension they had carried for years beginning to dissolve under this aquatic caress. The Southern Dragon King, Qin, spoke next, his voice carrying the warmth of summer seas. In the southern waters, we teach the wisdom of warmth without burning. Your spirit has been cold for so long, shivering in the wind of anxiety and fear. But true warmth comes not from the fire that consumes, but from the steady heat of deep contentment. His scales glowed with the warm coral colors of tropical reefs, and Lin felt heat beginning to build in their core, not the feverish heat of stress or inflammation, but the gentle warmth of a body that has remembered how to relax completely. The heat spread through their limbs like honey, melting the last traces of physical tension. From the Western throne, Run's voice flowed like evening tides, carrying the mystery of twilight waters. Here in the Western depths, we guard the waters of reflection and dreams. You have forgotten how to dream truly, how to let your mind rest in the gentle darkness where healing happens. Tonight, and every night hereafter, your dreams will be pools of silver light where your soul can bathe in peace. His pearl-scaled form caught the bioluminescent light of the chamber and reflected it back in patterns that were hypnotic and soothing. Lin felt their mind beginning to quiet, thoughts slowing down like sediment settling in still water. The constant chatter of worry and planning that had filled their head for so long was finally finding silence. The northern dragon king, Shun, completed the circle with a voice like the deep currents of Arctic seas. And from the northern waters comes the gift of stillness, the profound quiet that lies beneath all movement in the deepest places, where pressure creates diamonds and cold creates clarity. You will find the ultimate rest, not the absence of life, but life so perfectly balanced that it appears to be completely still. His sapphire scales held depths like the night sky, and as Lin gazed into them, they felt themselves sinking into a peace so profound it was almost like disappearing entirely. But it was not the disappearance of death or unconsciousness. It was the dissolution of everything that was not essential, everything that had been preventing true rest. The 4 dragon kings began to speak in unison, their voices creating harmonies that seemed to resonate in the very water around Lin. Child of the surface world, you have been trying to rest in the shallows, where the waves of daily life continue to toss you about. But true rest comes only in the depths, where the pressure of the deep transforms everything it touches into something more precious than it was before. As they spoke, Lin felt themselves sinking deeper into the water, but there was no fear, no sense of drowning. Instead, they felt held, supported, cradled by the infinite ocean of peace that these dragon kings had mastered. The pressure of the deep water was not crushing, but embracing, like being wrapped in the arms of the earth itself. Let the waters carry away all that you have been carrying, the dragon kings continued. Let the currents wash through every cell of your body, every thought in your mind, every memory that has held pain. Here in our realm, there is only flowing, only the eternal circulation of life-giving water that cleanses and heals and renews. Lin felt layers of old pain, old worry, old tiredness being dissolved and carried away by the currents. It was as if they were being cleaned from the inside out, not roughly or violently, but with the gentle persistence of water that eventually wears away even the hardest stone. The palace around them began to pulse with a rhythm that matched the beating of their heart. And Lin realized that they were becoming part of this underwater symphony. Their breathing, their heartbeat, their very presence was adding to the harmony of this place, where the dragon kings held their eternal court. Rest now in the deep waters, the dragon kings whispered, and their voices became the sound of waves lapping against distant shores. Let your dreams be filled with the gentle movement of currents, the play of light through water, the sensation of being perfectly supported by forces greater than yourself. As sleep claimed Lin once again, they felt themselves being cradled by the 4 dragon kings, each one contributing their unique gift to the healing process. The Eastern King wrapped them in the renewal of spring waters. The Southern King warmed them with the life-giving heat of summer seas. The Western king blessed them with the reflective peace of evening tides, and the Northern king surrounded them with the profound stillness of the deepest places. In their dreams, Lin swam through coral gardens where every flower was a prayer, through kelp forests where wisdom grew like living trees, through caverns where pearls of pure peace were formed by the gentle pressure of the deep. And everywhere they swam, the water sang to them, teaching their body and spirit the ancient rhythms of rest and renewal. When they would wake, they would find themselves on the shores of another realm, carried there by the loving currents of the Dragon King's domain. But for now, they rested in the depths, learning the first and most fundamental lesson of true peace. That rest comes not from the absence of movement, but from moving in perfect harmony with the eternal flow of life itself. Chapter 4: The Garden of Restoration. Lin awakened to find themselves lying on a shore unlike any they had ever seen. The sand beneath their body was not composed of ordinary grains, but of tiny crystals that sang soft, harmonious notes when touched by the gentle waves that lapped at the shoreline. Each crystal was a different color: rose quartz pink, amethyst purple, citrine gold. And together, they created a beach that sparkled with rainbow light under a sky painted in the soft pastels of eternal dawn. The transition from the underwater realm to this terrestrial paradise had been seamless, as if the Dragon King's currents had carried them through dimensions as easily as through water. Lin felt renewed in ways they had never experienced before, as if every cell in their body had been cleansed and recharged by their time in the deep waters. The chronic tiredness that had plagued them for so long was gone, replaced by a gentle vitality that flowed through their limbs like warm honey. As they rose from the singing sand, Lin noticed that their clothing had been transformed. Instead of the earthly garments they had worn when their journey began, they now wore robes of silk that seemed to be woven from clouds and starlight. The fabric was so light it felt like wearing air itself, yet it provided perfect comfort against their skin. The robes shifted color with their movements, flowing through shades of sky blue, sea green, and pearl white. Before them stretched a garden that defied every law of nature Lin had ever known. Trees grew in perfect spirals, their branches reaching toward the sky in mathematical curves that were both beautiful and hypnotic to follow. The leaves were not green, but every color imaginable. Some trees bore foliage of pure silver that chimed like bells when the wind passed through them. Others had leaves of gold that caught and reflected light in patterns that seemed to tell stories of ancient wisdom. Flowers bloomed in impossible abundance, their petals made of materials that seemed more like jewelry than plant matter. Roses with petals of ruby crystal grew beside lotuses with leaves of jade, while peonies of pearl white released fragrances that carried the essence of pure joy. The scents did not compete with each other, but blended into a symphony of aromatherapy that seemed designed specifically to calm the nervous system and ease the mind into states of deeper peace. Streams of liquid light meandered through the garden, their waters clear as crystal, but glowing with an inner radiance that illuminated the path ahead. The streams sang as they flowed, their voices blending into melodies that were both hauntingly beautiful and deeply soothing. Fish made of living light swam in these streams, their forms shifting and flowing like liquid starlight. As Lin began to walk deeper into the garden, following a path paved with smooth stones that seemed to massage their feet with each step, they became aware of a presence moving through the trees ahead. The presence was vast and benevolent, carrying the feeling of a mother's love magnified to cosmic proportions. Through the crystal trees came a figure of indescribable beauty and grace. This was Nuwa, the mother goddess, creator of humanity, the divine being who had once repaired the very pillars of heaven with her own hands. But here, in this garden of restoration, she appeared not as a distant deity, but as the most loving mother imaginable, her face radiant with compassion and her arms open in eternal welcome. Her form was both human and divine, shifting between the two aspects as naturally as water changes shape. Sometimes she appeared as a woman of magnificent beauty, her hair flowing like liquid night, studded with stars, her robes made of the same silk as the sky at dawn. Other times, her serpentine aspect was visible, the lower half of her body that of a great dragon, but a dragon of such gentle power that it inspired no fear, only awe and deep comfort. "My precious child," Nuwa said, and her voice was like the sound of rain on leaves, like the whisper of wind through grass, like the gentle murmur of a stream over stones. "You have journeyed far and learned much from our dragon kings. Now you have come to the place where the deepest healing happens, where the very fabric of your being can be rewoven into patterns of perfect peace." As she spoke, she gestured to the garden around them, and Lin saw that every element, every tree, every flower, every stream was responding to her presence with increased luminosity and beauty. The garden was not just a place, but an extension of Nuwa's own divine nature, a physical manifestation of her infinite capacity to nurture and heal. Long ago, Nuwa continued, walking beside Lin along the path of singing stones, "I created the first humans from clay, breathing into them the spark of life and consciousness. But I see now that what I created has become tired, worn down by the weight of existence in a world that has forgot the true nature of peace. You have come here carrying the weariness of all humanity, and here I will remake you, not by destroying what you are, but by remembering what you were always meant to be. They walked deeper into the garden, where the trees grew larger and more magnificent. Some towered into the sky like living cathedrals, their trunks wide enough to house entire temples. Others spread their branches in perfect circles, creating natural pavilions where the light filtered through leaves in patterns that induced natural states of meditation. In the center of the garden stood a tree unlike all the others, the tree of original peace. Its trunk was made of some material that seemed to be part wood, part crystal, part pure light. Its roots were visible above ground, spreading out in intricate patterns that formed natural seats and resting places. Its branches held every type of leaf that had ever existed, and its fruits were globes of pure peace that glowed with soft inner light. This is where the healing happens, Nuwa said, guiding Lin to a natural seat formed by the great tree's roots. Here, where the tree of original peace grows, you can rest in the knowledge of what you truly are beneath all the layers of tiredness and pain and worry that you have accumulated. As Lin settled into the root seat, they felt the tree's energy flowing into them. It was like being plugged into the source of all life, all peace, all healing. The tree's roots seemed to extend directly into their body, carrying away toxins and tension, and replacing them with pure, undiluted vitality. Nuwa knelt beside them, her hands hovering over Lin's body without quite touching. Where her hands passed, Lin felt waves of healing energy penetrating every cell, every organ, every system. It was as if she was literally reweaving the fabric of their being, removing the threads of chronic stress and exhaustion, and replacing them with fibers of pure peace and renewal. The tiredness you have carried, Nuwa said softly, is not your natural state. It is like dust that has accumulated on a mirror, hiding your true reflection. Now, I will clean the mirror of your being so that you can see yourself as you truly are, a creature of infinite peace, designed to rest in the gentle flow of existence. As she worked, Lin felt changes happening at levels deeper than thought or emotion. Their very DNA seemed to be remembering a different pattern, a blueprint for a body that knew how to rest, how to heal, how to exist in a state of natural peace. Their nervous system was being rewired to default to calm rather than anxiety. Their muscles were learning to hold relaxation as their natural state. Their mind was discovering that its true nature was not the constant chatter of worry, but the vast silence of pure awareness. The process was not quick, but it was profoundly gentle. Time seemed to move differently here, stretching and flowing like honey, allowing every change to happen at exactly the right pace. Lin felt no impatience, no desire to hurry the process. Instead, they rested in the delicious sensation of being completely cared for, of being held by forces so loving and powerful that surrender was not just possible, but inevitable. Around them, the garden responded to the healing work by growing even more beautiful. Flowers opened that had been closed. Streams began to sing new melodies, and the very air became more luminous. It was as if Lin's healing was contributing to the healing of the entire realm, as if their return to peace was helping to restore peace to all of creation. "There," Nuwa said finally, sitting back with a smile of infinite satisfaction. "The work is complete. You are remade, not as something new, but as what you have always been beneath the layers of forgetting. Stand now and feel the difference." Lin rose from the root seat and immediately felt the transformation. Their body moved with a fluid grace they had never possessed before, as if they were dancing to music only they could hear. Their breathing was slow and deep, filling their lungs with air that seemed to carry particles of peace directly into their bloodstream. Their mind was clear and quiet, like a still lake reflecting the sky. But most remarkably, they felt rested. Not just the temporary rest that comes from a good night's sleep, but the deep, cellular rest of a being whose very essence has been restored to its natural state of peace. It was as if they had been given a new operating system, one designed for ease and flow rather than struggle and strain. "This is how you were meant to feel," Nuwa said, her voice full of joy at seeing her work completed. "This is the natural state of a being who knows their true nature. Take this gift with you as you continue your journey, and remember that no matter how far you travel, you can always return to this state of perfect rest." As she spoke, the tree of original peace released one of its glowing fruits, which floated down to hover just above Lin's heart. With a gentle touch, Nuwa pressed the fruit into their chest, where it dissolved into warm light that spread through their entire being. "This is the seed of permanent peace," she said. "It will grow within you, ensuring that you never again forget how to rest truly. No matter what challenges you face, no matter how busy your life becomes, this seed will remind your body and spirit of their natural state of tranquility." Lin felt the seed taking root in their heart, sending out tendrils of peace that would forever connect them to this moment of perfect healing. They bowed deeply to Nuwa, words feeling inadequate to express their gratitude for such a profound gift. "Rest now," Nuwa said, gesturing to a grove of willows whose drooping branches formed a natural shelter. "Let your transformed being settle into its new patterns. When you wake, you will be ready for the next stage of your journey, carrying within you the unshakable foundation of true rest. As Lin walked toward the willow grove, they felt their footsteps growing lighter with each step, as if they were gradually becoming part of the garden's eternal dream. The willow branches parted like curtains, revealing a bed made of rose petals and moss that seemed to have been waiting just for them. Lying down among the soft petals, Lin felt themselves sinking not just into the bed, but into a state of rest, so complete it was like being embraced by the universe itself. The willows sang gentle lullabies, their leaves rustling with the rhythm of cosmic breathing, and sleep came like a blessing, carrying them deeper into the mystery of their transformation. Chapter 5: The Peach Garden of Immortality. When consciousness returned to Lin, it arrived not as an awakening, but as a gradual brightening, like dawn breaking slowly over mountain peaks. They found themselves standing at the edge of an orchard that stretched beyond the horizon, filled with trees whose very presence spoke of eternity. These were the legendary peach trees of immortality, their gnarled trunks bearing the wisdom of countless ages, their branches heavy with fruit that glowed like captured sunsets. The transformation that Nuwa had worked upon Lin was now fully integrated into their being. They moved through the orchard with the fluid grace of one who had finally learned to exist in harmony with their own nature. Each breath came easily and naturally. Each step felt perfectly balanced, and their entire being hummed with the quiet contentment of a soul that had found its way home to peace. The peach trees were ancient beyond measure, their bark telling stories written in spirals and whorls that seemed to shift and change as Lin walked past. Some trees were massive, their canopies spreading like green cathedrals, where filtered light created patterns of sacred geometry on the ground below. Others were more modest in size, but radiated such intense peace that simply standing near them induced states of natural meditation. The peaches themselves were works of art that happened to be fruit. Their skin held every shade of pink and gold imaginable, sometimes shifting through the colors of sunrise, as if they contained liquid dawn. They hung from the branches like lanterns made of crystallized joy, each one perfect in its roundness, each one emanating a fragrance that spoke directly to the soul's deepest longing for contentment. As Lin walked deeper into the orchard, following paths paved with fallen blossoms that released clouds of sweet perfume with each footstep, they became aware of a presence approaching through the trees. This was not the overwhelming divine presence of Nuwa, but something more playful, more mischievous, yet equally benevolent. Through the peach groves came a figure that seemed to embody eternal youth and irrepressible joy. This was son Wukong, the Monkey King, but not as the fierce warrior of legend. Here, in the Garden of Immortality, he appeared as the keeper of sacred laughter, the guardian of the joy that comes from perfect freedom from worry and care. His fur was golden like sunlight, and his eyes sparkled with the delight of one who had learned to find wonder in every moment. He moved through the trees with acrobatic grace, sometimes walking on the ground, sometimes swinging from branch to branch, sometimes simply appearing wherever Lin needed him to be, as if the normal rules of space and time were merely suggestions he chose to follow when it amused him. Ah, the weary one has become the peaceful one, Sun Wukong exclaimed, his voice carrying the music of wind chimes and temple bells. I can see the work that Mother Nuwa has done, and the gifts the dragon kings have given. You wear peace now like a perfectly fitted garment. But peace without joy is like a garden without flowers, beautiful, but missing its full glory. As he spoke, he plucked one of the glowing peaches from a nearby branch and offered it to Lin with a theatrical bow that was both playful and genuinely respectful. This fruit carries the essence of eternal youth, but not the youth of the body. That is a small thing. This is the youth of the spirit, the ability to meet each moment with fresh eyes and an open heart, no matter how many moments you have already lived. Lin accepted the peach with hands that no longer trembled with exhaustion or anxiety. The fruit was warm to the touch, as if it contained its own tiny sun. And when they bit into it, the flavor was like tasting happiness itself. The juice that flowed over their tongue carried notes of sunshine and laughter, of spring mornings and childhood summers, of every moment they had ever felt truly, purely content. As they ate, Lin felt changes happening in their perception rather than their body. Colors became more vivid, sounds became richer and more musical, and the very air seemed to sparkle with possibility. It was as if they had been living their entire life looking through dusty windows. And now, those windows had been cleaned to crystal clarity. Do you feel it? Sun Wukong asked, his tail swishing with excitement as he watched Lin's transformation, the joy that bubbles up from the very core of existence. This is not the frantic happiness that depends on circumstances, but the deep joy that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong, exactly when you belong there. Lin nodded, feeling a smile spreading across their face, not forced or artificial, but as natural as the sunrise. The smile seemed to start in their heart and radiate outward until their entire being was smiling. It was a sensation they hadn't experienced in so long they had almost forgotten it was possible. Sun Wukong began to move through the orchard with increasing playfulness, demonstrating the freedom that comes with perfect trust in the universe's benevolence. He tumbled through the air, balanced on impossible angles, and turned ordinary movements into expressions of pure joy. But his acrobatics were not showing off. They were invitations for Lin to remember their own capacity for spontaneous delight. "Come," he said, extending a hand that was both human and simian, both earthly and magical. "Let me show you how to move through life the way peach blossoms dance on the wind, completely committed to the moment, completely free of the weight of yesterday or the worry of tomorrow." Taking his hand, Lin found themselves being led through movements that were part dance, part martial art, part meditation in motion. Sun Wukong guided them through sequences that were perfectly calibrated to their current abilities, never demanding more than they could comfortably give, always encouraging them to discover new ways their body could express the joy that was now flowing through their system. They leaped from stone to stone across streams of liquid light, balanced on branches that should have been too thin to support them, and moved through space in ways that seemed to defy gravity, but felt completely natural. With each movement, Lin felt their remaining attachments to limitation and self-doubt falling away like leaves in autumn wind. "You see," Sun Wukong explained, as they performed a particularly graceful series of spins around an ancient peach tree, "immortality is not about living forever in time. It's about discovering the part of yourself that exists outside of time altogether. When you find that place, the place where you are watching your life rather than being tossed around by it, then you have found the true peach of immortality." As if summoned by his words, the trees around them began to release their blossoms in a gentle snow of pink and white petals. The petals fell not randomly, but in patterns, creating mandalas in the air that spoke of the perfect order underlying all apparent chaos. Lin found themselves standing in the center of this living mandala, feeling completely held by the beauty surrounding them. "This is the secret the Jade Emperor will share with you," Sun Wukong continued, his voice becoming more gentle, more reverent. "The secret of ruling not through control, but through such perfect alignment with the Tao that everything naturally organizes itself around your stillness. But you cannot learn this secret until you have learned to be truly playful, truly spontaneous, truly free." He demonstrated this freedom by suddenly disappearing and reappearing in the crown of the tallest peach tree, then sliding down a rainbow that materialized just for his convenience, landing beside Lin with a soft thump and a grin that could have lit up the darkest night. "The universe loves to play," he said, his eyes twinkling with cosmic mischief. "It created billions of stars just for the joy of watching them dance. It grows flowers that no one will ever see just for the pleasure of making something beautiful. It sends music through the wind and paints pictures in the clouds because existence itself is a celebration. Lin felt this truth resonating in every cell of their transformed being, the serious weight they had carried for so long, the feeling that life was a problem to be solved rather than a gift to be enjoyed, dissolved completely under the influence of Sun Wukong's infectious joy and the immortal Peach's magic. As the afternoon wore on, though time seemed to move differently here, stretching and condensing according to the rhythm of their enjoyment. Sun Wukong taught Lin game after game that were really disguised lessons in the art of being fully present. They played with shadows, making them dance in impossible ways. They had contests to see who could make the peach trees laugh the loudest by telling them jokes. They raced the streams of light, not to win, but for the pure pleasure of moving in harmony with flowing energy. Each game, each moment of laughter, each spontaneous expression of joy added another layer to Lin's transformation. They were becoming not just peaceful, not just healed, but truly alive in a way they had never been before. The spark that Nuwa had mentioned when she spoke of creating humanity was now burning brightly in their chest, no longer obscured by the ashes of exhaustion and worry. As the eternal afternoon began to fade into the soft pastels of evening, Sun Wukong led Lin to a grove where the oldest peach tree in the orchard held court. This tree was so ancient its roots had become crystal. So wise its fruit glowed with the light of accumulated ages. Beneath its branches was a natural amphitheater where the grass had grown into cushioned seats. "Rest here," Sun Wukong said, his voice now carrying the gentle authority of a true teacher. "Let the joy you have rediscovered settle into your bones. In your dreams tonight, you will dance with the immortals, play games with the stars, and remember what it feels like to be completely free from every burden, except the delightful weight of your own happiness." As Lin settled into the living cushions of grass, they felt their body relaxing in ways that were both familiar and entirely new. The peace that Nuwa had woven into their being was now infused with Sun Wukong's gift of spontaneous joy, creating a state of rest that was not passive, but vibrantly alive, not empty, but full of infinite possibility. The ancient peach tree began to sing, not with a voice, but with the rustling of leaves that had learned to harmonize with the music of the spheres. The sound was hypnotic and deeply soothing, carrying Lin into a sleep that was more like a conscious journey into realms of pure delight. In their dreams, they found themselves playing endless games with beings of light and joy, learning that rest and play were not opposites, but different aspects of the same divine energy. They danced with stars, rode comets like celestial horses, and discovered that the universe itself was the ultimate playground for souls who had remembered how to be truly free. When they would wake, they would carry within them not just peace and healing, but the irrepressible joy of a being who had rediscovered their immortal nature. The seed of permanent peace that Nuwa had planted in their heart had now sprouted into a tree of eternal joy, its roots reaching deep into their soul, its branches extending into every aspect of their existence. Chapter 6: The Jade Emperor's Celestial Court. Lin awakened to find themselves standing before gates that defied description, constructed from materials that seemed to exist at the intersection of matter and pure consciousness. The gates were neither fully solid nor entirely ethereal, but something perfectly balanced between the two states, like crystallized intention or materialized wisdom. They rose into infinity, their surfaces covered with characters that were not quite writing, not quite art, but something that spoke directly to the soul without requiring translation. The transformation that had been building through their journey was now approaching completion. Lin stood with the perfect posture of one who had finally learned to support themselves from within, their breathing naturally deep and rhythmic, their face serene with the accumulated peace of their travels through the celestial realms. The joy that Sun Wukong had awakened in them sparkled in their eyes like captured starlight, while the deep rest that the Dragon Kings had taught them flowed through their body like a river of liquid tranquility. As they approached the gates, celestial attendants appeared beings so refined by eons of service in the highest realms that they seemed more like living prayers than individual entities. They moved with a grace that was beyond choreography, their robes flowing like captured wind, their faces radiating the kind of peace that comes from serving something infinitely worthy of devotion. Welcome, traveler from the realm of sleep and dreams. The attendants spoke in unison, their voices creating harmonies that seemed to tune the very air around them. The Jade Emperor has been expecting you. You have been prepared by the Dragon Kings, transformed by Mother Nuwa, and blessed with immortal joy by the Monkey King. Now, you come to learn the final lesson, the peace that comes from perfect stillness at the center of infinite movement. The gates opened without sound, revealing a courtyard that stretched beyond the horizon, paved with clouds that supported weight like the most solid marble, while remaining visibly soft and ethereal. Columns of light, rather than stone, supported a sky that was somehow both inside and outside, containing weather that existed purely for beauty. Gentle rains of liquid starlight, snow made of crystallized music, breezes that carried the essence of every flower that had ever bloomed. In the center of this impossible space sat the Jade Emperor, and Lin understood immediately why he was called the ruler of heaven and earth. His authority came not from any display of power or majesty, but from a stillness so complete that it seemed to be the very center around which all of creation naturally organized itself. He was the eye of every storm, the axis around which all wheels turned, the silence that gave meaning to every sound. He appeared as a figure of indeterminate age, sometimes seeming young with the eternal youth of enlightened consciousness, sometimes ancient with the wisdom of countless eons, sometimes ageless in a way that transcended the very concept of time. His robes were woven from the fabric of space itself, containing galaxies in their folds, and his crown was made of crystallized thoughts, so pure they had become visible. But it was his eyes that conveyed his true nature. They held the depth of one who had seen through every illusion. Yet they were infinitely kind, infinitely patient, infinitely loving. Looking into them was like looking into the very source of peace itself, the place from which all tranquility flowed. "Come forward, dear child," the Jade Emperor said, and his voice was like the sound of the universe breathing, so fundamental that it seemed to arise from the very fabric of existence. "You have traveled far and learned much. Now you have come to the place where all learning culminates. The discovery that you have always been exactly what you sought to become." As Lin walked across the cloud-paved courtyard, they felt their footsteps creating ripples of peace that spread out in all directions. The very act of moving through this space was transformative, each step releasing another layer of the illusion that they were separate from the peace they had been seeking. Around the edges of the courtyard, Lin glimpsed the immortal court beings who had achieved such perfect harmony with the Tao that they existed in a state of constant, effortless service to the highest good. Some were recognizable as figures from legend and mythology. Others were entities so refined by their spiritual development that they appeared as geometric patterns of living light. But all shared the same quality of perfect peace that emanated from the Jade Emperor himself. "Sit," the Jade Emperor gestured to a throne that materialized beside his own. Not a throne of authority, but of perfect rest, designed to support not a ruler, but a soul that had finally learned to be completely still. "Let me show you the secret that all the others have been preparing you to understand." As Lin settled onto the throne of rest, they felt themselves sinking not into furniture, but into the very fabric of peaceful existence. The throne supported them at levels beyond the physical, cradling their spirit, their consciousness, their deepest essence in arms of pure tranquility. "Watch," the Jade Emperor said, and with a gesture that was barely perceptible, he revealed the true nature of his realm. Lin saw that the entire celestial court was not a place, but a state of consciousness, and the Jade Emperor was not ruling over it, but embodying it so completely that it naturally manifested around him. Every immortal, every attendant, every flower and cloud and stream of light was an expression of his perfect inner stillness. The way ripples on a pond are expressions of the stone dropped into its center. This is the final secret, the Jade Emperor continued, his voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere, as if Lin's own deepest wisdom was finally finding its voice. You have been seeking peace as if it were something you could acquire, somewhere you could travel to, something you could achieve. But peace is not a destination. It is your true nature, temporarily obscured by the movement of seeking itself. As he spoke, Lin felt the last veil falling away from their understanding. All the healing they had received, all the joy they had discovered, all the rest they had learned. These were not additions to their being, but the removal of everything that had been preventing them from recognizing what they had always been. The Dragon Kings taught you to flow like water, but you are the stillness that gives water somewhere to flow. Nuwa healed your body and spirit, but you are the wholeness that made healing possible. Sun Wukong awakened your joy, but you are the peace in which joy dances. And I show you authority, but you are the silence that gives authority its power. Lin felt themselves expanding, not physically, but consciously, until they encompassed the entire celestial realm. They were not becoming the Jade Emperor, but discovering that the consciousness that looked out from his eyes was the same consciousness that looked out from theirs. The one, eternal, peaceful awareness that was the true self of every being that had ever existed. In this moment of recognition, the boundaries between seeker and sought, between traveler and destination, between the one who rests and rest itself, dissolved completely. Lin found themselves sitting on a throne that was inside a court, that was inside a realm, that was inside their own infinite consciousness, like an endless series of mirrors, reflecting the same perfect peace. Now you understand, the Jade Emperor said, smiling with the satisfaction of a teacher whose student has finally grasped the ultimate lesson. You can return to any realm you have visited, the depths of the Dragon Kings, the Garden of Nuwa, the orchard of Sun Wukong, not as a traveler seeking something outside yourself, but as consciousness exploring its own infinite nature. Around them, the celestial court began to pulse with gentle light, and Lin realized that every being present was celebrating this moment of recognition, not celebrating them personally, but celebrating the eternal process by which consciousness recognizes itself, the cosmic moment of awakening that had been happening for eternity and would continue happening forever. But now, the Jade Emperor continued, it is time for you to learn the final skill, how to rest in this recognition even while appearing to live an ordinary life. For the greatest magic is not to escape the world of form, but to see through its apparent solidity to the peace that was never actually disturbed by it. As he spoke, the celestial court began to fade around them, not disappearing, but becoming transparent, revealing that it had always been an overlay on the same peaceful awareness that was Lin's deepest nature. The throne of rest dissolved back into the stillness from which it had emerged, and the Jade Emperor himself became more and more translucent, until he was visible only as a gentle smile, floating in the space of Lin's own consciousness. "Sleep now," his voice whispered from the very center of peace itself. "And in your dreams, integrate all that you have learned and become. When you wake, you will find yourself returned to the world you know. But you will never again forget what you have discovered about your true nature." Lin felt themselves being cradled by the entire universe as sleep approached, not the sleep of exhaustion, but the conscious rest of a being who had finally come home to itself. The last thing they experienced was the sensation of infinite tenderness, as if every star in the sky had leaned down to tuck them in for the night. In their dreams, they found themselves simultaneously in all the realms they had visited, dancing with Sun Wukong in the orchard, while floating in the Dragon King's depths, while being held by Nuwa in her garden, while sitting in perfect stillness on the Jade Emperor's throne. All the experiences were happening at once, not in confusion, but in perfect harmony, like a symphony in which every note was the same perfect piece, expressing itself in infinite variety. When they would wake, they would carry within them not just memories of these realms, but the living reality of what they had discovered. The seed of permanent peace that Nuwa had planted would now bloom into the full recognition of their eternal nature, ensuring that no matter where they went or what they did, they would never again be separated from the profound rest that was their birthright as conscious beings. Chapter 7: The Valley of Eternal Moonlight. Lin's awakening came like the gradual emergence of the moon from behind clouds, gentle and luminous and unhurried. They found themselves standing in a valley that existed entirely within moonlight, where the silver radiance was not merely illumination, but the very substance from which everything was made. The grass beneath their feet was woven from moonbeams. The flowers that bloomed along the valley's edges were crystallized lunar essence, and the stream that meandered through the center flowed with liquid light that sang with the voice of ancient lullabies. The integration of their journey was now nearly complete. Lin stood transformed, carrying within their being the flowing peace of the Dragon Kings, the cellular healing of Nuwa's touch, the immortal joy of Sun Wukong's friendship, and the recognition of their true nature that the Jade Emperor had revealed, but something new was emerging now. A quality of luminous tranquility that seemed to be the synthesis of all they had learned. The way moonlight is the sun's fire, transformed into something gentle enough to illuminate dreams. This valley was Chang'e's domain, the realm of the moon goddess who had chosen the beauty of eternal solitude over the harshness of earthly existence. But here, solitude did not mean loneliness. It meant the completion that comes when one has found the fullness of their own company. The peace that needs nothing added to it because it is already perfect in itself. The valley curved in a gentle crescent, like a cupped hand holding precious water. And at its far end stood a palace that seemed to be constructed entirely from crystallized moonlight. Its walls were translucent silver. Its towers reached toward the star-filled sky like prayers made visible. And its gardens were filled with flora that existed only in the light of the eternal moon. Night-blooming cereus flowers the size of dinner plates, jasmine vines that glowed with their own inner light, and trees whose leaves were made of the same gossamer material as spider webs touched by dew. As Lin walked through the valley, following a path paved with smooth stones that seemed to be made of compressed moonbeams, they felt each step taking them deeper into a state of consciousness that was profoundly peaceful, yet vibrantly aware. The moonlight here was not cold, as earthly moonlight sometimes seemed, but warm and nurturing, like the glow that surrounds a candle flame, magnified to encompass an entire realm. The sound of a guqin being played with masterful skill drifted through the silver air, its strings creating melodies that spoke of the beauty to be found in contemplation, the richness that blooms in quiet spaces, the way solitude can become a garden where the soul grows in directions impossible when constantly responding to external demands. Following the music, Lin came to a pavilion of impossible delicacy. Its pillars so slender they seemed to be made of crystallized breath. Its roof so light it appeared to float independently above them. Within the pavilion, seated at an instrument that seemed to be carved from a single piece of moon pearl, was Chang'e herself. She was beautiful in the way that moonlight on water is beautiful, not demanding attention, but impossible to ignore once noticed. Not bright like the sun, but luminous in a way that revealed hidden depths in everything it touched. Her robes flowed like liquid silver, and her hair was adorned with ornaments that seemed to be made from captured starlight. But it was her face that conveyed her true nature, serene with the peace of one who had chosen contemplation over action, complete with the fullness of one who had discovered that everything they needed already existed within themselves. "Welcome to the Valley of Eternal Moonlight," Chang'e said, her voice like the sound of wind through silk, like the whisper of snowflakes falling on still water. You have traveled through the realms of action and healing, of joy and recognition. Now you come to the place where all that you have learned settles into perfect stillness, where the gold of spiritual achievement is refined into the silver of pure being. She gestured for Lin to sit on cushions that seemed to be made from woven moonbeams, soft beyond description, yet perfectly supportive. As Lin settled into their ethereal embrace, they felt themselves sinking into a quality of rest that was different from anything they had experienced before. Not the recuperative rest of the exhausted, not even the peaceful rest of the healed, but the complete rest of one who had arrived at their true home. Here, Chang'e continued, her fingers moving across the Guanyin strings in patterns that seemed to weave peace directly into the fabric of reality. We learn the final lesson of rest, how to be so completely at peace with solitude that we become capable of true intimacy, so comfortable with our own company that we can offer genuine presence to others. As she played, the music seemed to arise not just from the instrument, but from the valley itself, as if every blade of silver grass, every luminous flower, every drop of liquid moonlight in the stream was contributing its voice to a symphony of perfect contentment. The melody was simple, but infinitely deep, like a lullaby that contained all the wisdom of the ages. In the earthly realm, Chang'e said, beings fear solitude because they have not yet discovered the richness of their own inner landscape. They fill their lives with noise and activity and constant stimulation because they believe that emptiness means absence. But true solitude is not empty. It is so full that nothing needs to be added to it. Lin felt the truth of these words settling into their consciousness, like sediment sinking to the bottom of a clear lake. All their life, they had been running from quiet moments, filling every pause with activity or entertainment or worry. But now, in this valley of eternal moonlight, they discovered that silence was not the absence of sound, but the presence of profound peace. That solitude was not loneliness, but the recognition of their own completeness. Chang'e rose from her instrument with movements like liquid grace and walked to the edge of the pavilion, where the moonlight seemed to pool in her hands like silver water. "Come," she said, "let me show you the gardens where only the most beautiful thoughts can grow." They walked together through paths lined with night-blooming flowers that released fragrances so subtle and complex they seemed to tell stories. The jasmine that spoke of first love transformed into lasting devotion. The night-blooming cereus that shared the beauty found in rare and precious moments. The moonflowers that whispered of dreams so beautiful they made waking life more magical rather than less. In the center of the garden stood a pool so still, its surface was like polished silver, reflecting not just the star-filled sky above, but somehow revealing deeper truths. Chang'e gestured for Lin to look into its depths. And as they did, they saw not their physical reflection, but the reflection of their consciousness itself. Vast, luminous, peaceful, and more beautiful than they had ever imagined possible. "This is what you look like when you are truly at rest," Chang'e said softly. "Not the physical form, but the consciousness that inhabits it. See how it sparkles with its own light. See how it needs nothing added to it to be perfect. This is what you have always been, beneath all the layers of seeking and striving, and trying to become something other than what you are." As Lin gazed into the pool, they felt themselves falling in love with their own deepest nature, not in a narcissistic way, but in the way one falls in love with a sunset or a perfect piece of music, recognizing beauty so profound it brings tears of gratitude. They saw that the consciousness looking back at them was the same consciousness that looked out from Chang'e's eyes, from the Jade Emperor's throne, from the depths of the Dragon King's domains. "Now you understand why I chose the moon over the earth," Chang'e continued, settling beside the pool with movements that created no ripples in either the water or the peace that surrounded them. "Not because I rejected love, but because I discovered that the love I was seeking was already complete within myself. Not because I chose loneliness, but because I found such fullness in my own being that I became capable of loving everything without needing anything." She began to sing then, a wordless melody that seemed to arise from the very core of contentment. Her voice was neither high nor low, but perfectly placed, neither loud nor soft, but exactly the right volume to blend with the natural music of the valley. As she sang, Lin felt themselves being tuned like an instrument, their entire being adjusting itself to harmonize with the frequency of pure peace. The song continued as the eternal moon traced its slow arc across the star-filled sky, and Lin discovered that they could rest in the music without needing it to change or progress or reach any particular destination. Each note was complete in itself, each phrase perfect exactly as it was, and the entire song was simply peace expressing itself in sound. As the melody flowed around them, Lin began to understand that this was what true rest felt like, not the temporary pause between activities, but the discovery of a place within themselves that was already and always at peace, regardless of what was happening in the world of form. It was like finding an inner sanctuary that no external circumstance could disturb, a core of stillness that remained unshaken even in the midst of the greatest activity. "This valley," Chang'e said when her song naturally came to its completion, "exists within your own consciousness. You can return here whenever you need to remember what true solitude feels like, whenever you need to reconnect with the peace that requires nothing outside itself to be complete." As she spoke, she handed Lin a gift, a small sphere that seemed to contain captured moonlight, no larger than a pearl, but somehow holding within it the entire essence of the valley. "Keep this with you," she said. "When the world grows too noisy, when other beings' energy feels overwhelming, when you need to remember your own completeness, simply hold this sphere and feel yourself returning to this moment of perfect solitude." Lin accepted the gift with hands that were steady, with the confidence of one who had finally learned to trust their own inner resources. The sphere was warm against their palm, pulsing gently with the rhythm of their own heartbeat. And they understood that it was not really an external object, but a symbol of their own capacity to generate peace from within. "Rest now," Chang'e said, leading Lin to a bed made from woven starlight and moon silk. "Let your dreams be filled with the silver light of perfect contentment. When you wake, you will be ready for the final stage of your journey, the return to the ordinary world, carrying with you the extraordinary peace you have discovered." As Lin settled into the celestial bedding, they felt themselves being covered by a blanket made from liquid moonlight. So soft and light, it was like being embraced by the night sky itself. The last thing they heard was Chang's voice, humming the same wordless melody that had tuned their being to the frequency of peace. Sleep came like a gentle tide of silver light, carrying Lin into dreams where they floated through galaxies made of music, rested on planets constructed from pure contentment, and discovered that the entire universe was nothing but consciousness at play in the infinite garden of its own peaceful nature. In their dreams, they found themselves simultaneously alone and connected to everything, complete in their solitude, yet intimately united with all existence. They rested in the moon's light while dancing with the sun's fire, embraced silence while singing with the stars, discovered that true peace was not the opposite of joy, but the ground in which all joy grew. When they would wake, they would carry within them Chang's gift of luminous solitude, the ability to find perfect contentment in their own company, the recognition that peace was not something to be achieved, but something to be remembered, not a state to be reached, but their eternal nature finally recognized and embraced. Chapter 8: The Library of Infinite Wisdom. Lin awakened to find themselves standing before an entrance that was itself a paradox. Doors that were simultaneously open and closed. An invitation that required no seeking, because it was always available. A threshold that existed in the space between knowing and not knowing. This was the entrance to the library of infinite wisdom, where all the knowledge that had ever been discovered and all the understanding yet to be revealed existed in perfect harmony, organized not by subject or author, but by the depth of peace that each piece of wisdom could generate, the transformation that had been occurring throughout Lin's journey was now approaching its culmination. They stood with the embodied knowing of one who had traveled through the depths of healing, the heights of joy, the breadth of recognition, and the luminous stillness of perfect solitude. Each step of their path had built upon the last, creating a being capable of receiving the ultimate gift, the wisdom that brings not more knowledge to accumulate, but the understanding that dissolves all need for seeking. The library existed in a space that was somehow both vast and intimate, its shelves stretching beyond the horizon, yet arranging themselves perfectly around any visitor who entered. The books themselves were not ordinary volumes, but living repositories of understanding, their covers shifting and changing to display exactly the title that each reader most needed to see in that moment. Some books were made of materials that defied categorization, pages of crystallized thought, covers of woven light, bindings that hummed with the frequency of pure comprehension. As Lin stepped across the threshold, they were greeted by a figure who embodied the perfect balance between scholarly wisdom and practical compassion. This was Laozi, the ancient sage whose understanding of the Tao had become so complete that he existed more as a principle than a person, more as a living teaching than an individual teacher. His appearance was humble yet radiant, simple robes that seemed to be cut from the fabric of simplicity itself. A face that held the ageless quality of one who had seen through all complexity to the elegant truth that underlies existence. His eyes sparkled with gentle humor, as if he found infinite amusement in the elaborate ways that consciousness created problems for itself, and then sought complicated solutions to difficulties that disappeared the moment one stopped trying so hard to solve them. "Welcome, dear seeker who has become a finder," Laozi said, his voice like the sound of water finding its natural course down a mountainside. Unhurried, unstoppable, perfectly aligned with the nature of things. You have traveled far to arrive exactly where you started, learned much to discover what you already knew, and sought peace only to find that you are peace itself, wearing the costume of a seeker. As he spoke, the library rearranged itself around them, books gliding through the air like gentle birds to land exactly where they would be most helpful. Scrolls unrolled themselves to reveal passages written in characters that spoke directly to the heart, bypassing the mind's need to translate and interpret. Volumes opened to pages that contained not just words, but entire worlds of understanding, compressed into symbols that expanded infinitely when contemplated with a peaceful heart. Here, Laozi continued, gesturing to the impossible architecture of living knowledge that surrounded them. You will not learn anything new. Instead, you will remember what you have always known, but temporarily forgot. The greatest wisdom is not the accumulation of information, but the releasing of everything that obscures your natural clarity. He led Lin to a section of the library where the books seemed to pulse with a gentle inner light, their pages turning themselves as if stirred by invisible breezes of inspiration. These were not books in the ordinary sense, but crystallized experiences of beings who had discovered the secret of effortless living, the art of moving through existence with the fluid grace of water, the steady presence of mountains, the generous simplicity of clear sky. Sit, Laozi invited, indicating a chair that was clearly made from materialized comfort itself, not ornate or impressive, but so perfectly designed for rest that simply seeing it made Lin's body relax. Let me show you the 3 treasures that will complete your journey and prepare you for your return to the world of apparent complexity. As Lin settled into the chair of perfect rest, they felt their entire being supported, not just physically, but at every level of their existence. The chair held their body, their emotions, their thoughts, their very sense of identity with such gentle competence that they could finally release the last vestiges of effort they had been using to hold themselves together. The first treasure, Laozi said, opening a book that seemed to be made from crystallized tenderness, is compassion, not the effortful kind that tries to fix or change or improve, but the natural kindness that flows from a heart that has recognized its essential unity with all existence. As he read from the book, Lin felt their heart expanding to encompass not just their own journey toward peace, but the journey of every being that had ever struggled with tiredness, anxiety, or the feeling of being separate from the source of their own well-being. They saw that their personal healing was part of a vast web of awakening that connected all conscious beings, and that by finding peace within themselves, they were contributing to the peace of the entire universe. The second treasure, Laozi continued, opening another volume whose pages seemed to be made from liquid simplicity, is frugality of spirit. This does not mean living with less, but recognizing that you need very little beyond your own peaceful nature to be completely fulfilled. When you discover the wealth that exists in simplicity, the abundance that flowers in contentment, you become rich beyond measure while owning nothing that can be taken from you. Lin felt their desires simplifying, not through suppression, but through the natural satisfaction that comes when one discovers the source of all fulfillment within their own being, the endless hunger for more experiences, more achievements, more security, more stimulation, revealed itself as a misunderstanding about where happiness actually lived. True fulfillment, they understood now, came not from adding to their life, but from subtracting everything that interfered with their natural state of peace. The third treasure, Laozi said, opening a final book whose pages seemed to be made from crystallized humility, is the willingness to be last, to lead by following, to teach by learning, to achieve by not striving. This is the ultimate secret of effortless effectiveness. When you stop trying to force life to conform to your will, life begins to flow through you with a power and grace that no amount of effort could create. As he spoke these words, Lin felt the last traces of their old way of being, the pushing, the striving, the constant effort to make things different than they were, dissolving like morning mist touched by sunlight. In its place arose a way of existing that was like dancing with existence itself, moving in perfect harmony with forces far greater and wiser than their individual will. Laozi closed the 3 books, and as he did, their wisdom seemed to transfer directly into Lin's being, not as information to be remembered, but as qualities that had become inseparable from their very nature. Compassion flowed through their veins like warm honey. Simplicity structured their consciousness like a crystal's natural geometry, and humility grounded their awareness like roots reaching deep into nourishing earth. Now, Laozi said, standing with movements that were so natural they seemed choreographed by the Tao itself, you are ready for the final understanding. Come, let me show you the book that writes itself, the story that tells the reader, the knowledge that knows the knower. He led Lin deeper into the library, past sections where books read themselves aloud in languages that bypassed the ears and spoke directly to the soul. Past shelves where scrolls painted themselves with brushes made of liquid light, past alcoves where stone tablets carved themselves with truths so fundamental they could only be expressed in the language of pure being. At the very heart of the library stood a pedestal holding a book that was completely blank, yet somehow contained everything that had ever been written or ever could be written. Its pages were made from pure potential, its cover from crystallized possibility, its binding from the thread that connects all stories to the one story that includes them all. This, Laozi said with a smile that contained all the gentle humor of the universe, is your book. The story of your journey from seeking to finding, from restlessness to peace, from believing you were separate to recognizing your unity with all existence. But more than that, it is the book that every being writes when they discover their true nature. As Lin approached the blank book, words began to appear on its pages, not written by any external hand, but arising naturally from the depths of their own understanding. The story that appeared was their story, but told from the perspective of the peace that had been watching their entire journey. the awareness that had never actually been disturbed by any of the apparent problems that had driven them to seek reading their own story from this perspective. Lin saw that every moment of struggle had been perfect. Every experience of tiredness had been exactly what was needed to motivate their search for true rest. Every feeling of separation had been the natural prelude to recognizing their eternal unity with the source of all peace. "Do you see?" Laozi asked gently. "There was never anything wrong with you, never anything that needed to be fixed or healed or improved. There was only the temporary forgetting of what you are and the beautiful, inevitable process of remembering. The peace you have found was never absent. It was only obscured by the belief that you needed to find it somewhere other than where you already were." Lin nodded, feeling the last knot of seeking dissolving in their heart. They understood now that their entire journey had been a circle, a path that had led them away from home, only to help them appreciate the treasure they had never actually left, the peace they had discovered in the Dragon King's depths, the healing they had received in Nuwa's garden, the joy they had awakened in Sun Wukong's orchard, the recognition they had achieved in the Jade Emperor's court, the contentment they had found in Chang'e's valley. All of it had been their own nature, temporarily projected onto external realms, so that they could explore and appreciate its infinite richness. "Rest now," Laozi said, indicating a reading nook where cushions of woven starlight surrounded a low table made from crystallized silence. "Let the wisdom of your journey integrate completely in your dreams tonight. You will experience the unity that underlies all apparent diversity, the peace that connects all beings, the love that is the very fabric from which existence is woven." As Lin settled into the cosmic cushions, they felt themselves being embraced by the accumulated wisdom of every being who had ever discovered their true nature. The library around them pulsed with gentle light, its books sharing their essence without need for reading, its scrolls imparting their knowledge through osmosis of the heart. Sleep came like the gentle closing of a flower at dusk, natural and unhurried and perfectly timed. In their dreams, Lin found themselves simultaneously reading every book in the library and being read by every book, knowing every truth and being known by every truth, understanding that the knower, the known, and the process of knowing were all expressions of the same peaceful awareness that was their deepest nature. They dreamed of wisdom that required no effort to maintain, of understanding that needed no defense, of knowledge that grew deeper through sharing rather than diminished. They rested in the recognition that they were both student and teacher, both the one who seeks and the truth that is sought, both the reader of existence and the story being read. When they would wake, they would carry within them the library's greatest gift, The understanding that wisdom is not something to be acquired, but something to be remembered. Not a treasure to be hoarded, but a light to be shared. Not a destination to reach, but a way of being that transforms every step of the journey into a meditation on the infinite creativity of peaceful awareness, exploring its own nature. Chapter 9: The Temple of Eternal Return. Lin awakened to find themselves in a place that was both entirely new and deeply familiar. A temple that seemed to exist at the intersection of all temples that had ever been built, and all sacred spaces that existed in the realm of pure potential. The architecture defied earthly logic, pillars that spiraled into infinite regressions, courtyards that opened onto themselves in impossible geometries, gardens where the same flowers bloomed in every season simultaneously. This was the Temple of Eternal Return, where the circular nature of all spiritual journeys was made manifest in stone and light, and the crystallized breath of countless pilgrims who had discovered that the end of seeking was always exactly where the seeking began. Here, the illusion of linear progress dissolved into the recognition of eternal presence, where every moment of departure was simultaneously a moment of arrival. Lin stood transformed beyond recognition, yet more themselves than they had ever been. The journey through celestial realms had not changed their essential nature, but had revealed it, like wind clearing mist from the surface of a perfect mirror. They carried within their being the flowing wisdom of the Dragon Kings, the cellular regeneration of Nuwa's healing touch, the bubbling joy of Sun Wukong's immortal playfulness, the profound stillness of the Jade Emperor's recognition, the luminous solitude of Chang'e's moonlit contentment, and the crystallized understanding of Laozi's ultimate simplicity. But more than carrying these gifts, they had become them. The peace they had sought was revealed to be their very nature, temporarily obscured, but never absent, like the sun hidden by clouds, but never diminished by their shadows. Every quality they had discovered in the celestial realms was recognized as an aspect of their own consciousness, temporarily projected outward so that it could be explored and integrated and finally reclaimed as the natural inheritance of awakened awareness. At the center of the temple's main courtyard stood a fountain that was clearly the source from which all other fountains in all other realms drew their water. But this fountain flowed upward and downward simultaneously, its waters defying gravity to create patterns that spoke of the eternal circulation between form and formlessness, between seeking and finding, between departure and return. Beside the fountain waited a figure who was both stranger and intimate friend, both teacher and reflection of Lin's own deepest wisdom. This was Guanyin, the goddess of compassion, but not as an external deity to be worshipped, rather as the embodiment of Lin's own capacity for infinite tenderness toward all beings caught in the beautiful illusion of separation and seeking. Her presence was like coming home to a love that had been waiting patiently through every moment of forgetting. A compassion so vast it could embrace every mistake and misunderstanding as perfect expressions of consciousness learning to recognize itself. Her 1,000 hands were not separate appendages, but infinite expressions of her willingness to help in whatever way was needed. And her 1,000 eyes were infinite perspectives, through which the one awareness looked lovingly upon its own creative play. "Welcome home," Guanyin said, and her voice was the sound of every prayer that had ever been answered, every tear that had ever been blessed, every heart that had ever been healed by the simple recognition of its essential wholeness. You have traveled far to arrive exactly here, learned much to remember what you never forgot, sought peace only to discover that you are the very peace you were seeking. As she spoke, the temple around them began to reveal its true nature. Every pillar, every archway, every stone and timber and piece of sacred geometry was shown to be made from crystallized love, the love that creates beings, so that it can experience itself from infinite perspectives, the love that sends consciousness on journeys of apparent separation, so that it can experience the joy of returning home to itself, the love that manifests as both the seeker and the sought, so that the game of hide and seek can play out in endless variations throughout eternity. This temple, Guanyin continued, gesturing to the impossible architecture that surrounded them, exists in the space between breathing in and breathing out, between the end of one thought and the beginning of the next, between sleeping and waking. It is the eternal now where all journeys begin and end, the source to which all paths return, the home that was never actually left. She led Lin to a series of interconnected chambers, each one dedicated to a different aspect of the return journey. In the first chamber, called the Hall of Integration, Lin saw their entire celestial journey displayed as a mandala of living light. Each realm and teacher and lesson perfectly positioned in relationship to all the others, forming a complete map of consciousness, discovering its own nature. Here you can see, Guanyin explained, that every step of your journey was perfect, every experience necessary, every moment of seeking a note in the symphony of awakening. There was never anything random or accidental about your path. It unfolded exactly as it needed to, guided by the intelligence that is your deepest nature drawing you home to itself through whatever routes would be most beautiful and effective. In the second chamber, the Hall of Embodiment, Lin learned how to anchor their celestial discoveries in the density of physical existence. Guanyin showed them how to breathe the Dragon King's flowing peace into their nervous system, how to feel Nuwa's healing energy as an actual cellular process, how to access Sun Wukong's joy as a biochemical reality, how to rest in the Jade Emperor's stillness as the ground of their being, how to carry Chang'e's luminous solitude as an inner sanctuary, and how to live Laozi's 3 treasures as their natural way of being. The return, Guanyin said, is not about leaving the celestial realms behind, but about recognizing that they exist within you. Every realm you visited is a dimension of your own consciousness. Every teacher you met is an aspect of your own wisdom. Every gift you received is a quality that was always present in your being, but temporarily forgotten. In the 3rd chamber, the Hall of Service, Guanyin revealed the ultimate purpose of Lin's transformation. They saw that their journey from restlessness to peace was not a personal achievement, but a gift to all of existence, a demonstration that the return to essential nature was always possible, always available, always supported by the infinite love that is the ground of being. When you return to the world of apparent complexity, Guanyin said, you will carry with you not just your own peace, but the peace of all beings. Your very presence will be a reminder to other sleeping souls that awakening is possible. Your way of being will be a teaching that requires no words. Your simple embodiment of peace will be a blessing that touches every consciousness you encounter. In the 4th and final chamber, the Hall of Eternal Return, Lin came to understand the circular nature of all spiritual journeys. They saw that their return to the ordinary world was not an ending, but another beginning. That sharing the peace they had discovered would deepen their understanding of it. That helping others remember their true nature would strengthen their own recognition of it. This is why it is called the Temple of Eternal Return, Guanyin explained, leading Lin to a central altar where a flame burned that was neither lit nor extinguished, neither moving nor still, but somehow perfectly balanced between all apparent opposites. Every being who awakens to their true nature becomes a bridge between the realms of seeking and finding, a living doorway through which other souls can glimpse the peace that is their birthright. As they stood before the eternal flame, Guanyin began to sing, not with her voice alone, but with her entire being, her 1,000 hands creating madras that were visible music, her 1,000 eyes reflecting facets of truth that harmonized into a symphony of recognition. The song she sang was the song that every mother sings to help her children remember they are loved. The song that every teacher sings to help students recognize their own wisdom. The song that consciousness sings to itself as it plays the eternal game of forgetting and remembering its own nature. Lin felt themselves being prepared for return, not by having anything added to them, but by having everything unnecessary gently removed. The divine qualities they had accumulated were not taken away, but integrated so completely into their being that they became invisible, like water mixed with water, like space merged with space. "You will wake tomorrow," Guanyin said, her voice now coming from the very center of Lin's own heart. "In the same bed where your journey began, in the same room, in the same life, but you will never be the same being who lay down to sleep all those nights ago, when tiredness and restlessness sent you searching for peace." As she spoke, the temple began to grow translucent around them, revealing that it had always been a structure of consciousness rather than a building of stone and wood. The fountain continued to flow, but now Lin could see that its source was their own heart, and its waters were the endless circulation of love that connects all beings in the web of existence. "Sleep now," Guanyin whispered, and her voice was the sound of every lullaby that had ever been sung, every prayer that had ever brought comfort, every word of love that had ever helped a soul remember it was not alone. Let your final dreams be a bridge between the worlds, carrying you gently back to where you started, but can never return to unchanged. The last thing Lin saw as sleep claimed them was Guanyin's smile, not sad at their departure, but radiant with the joy of a mother sending a child out into the world with all the tools they need to thrive, confident that the love that connects them can never be broken by distance or time, or the apparent challenges of existence in the realm of form. In their final celestial dreams, Lin experienced themselves as simultaneously all the beings they had met on their journey, flowing like the dragon kings, creating like Nuwa, playing like Sun Wukong, ruling like the Jade Emperor, contemplating like Chang'e, teaching like Laozi, and loving like Guanyin. They understood that consciousness was one being exploring itself through infinite perspectives, one love expressing itself through countless forms, one peace manifesting as the entire cosmos of apparent diversity and complexity. When they would wake, they would carry within them not memories of an extraordinary journey, but the living reality of their transformed nature. Not nostalgia for celestial realms, but the recognition that every moment of ordinary existence was infinitely sacred, not the burden of maintaining a special state, but the effortless embodiment of what they had always been beneath the temporary costume of a seeker. Chapter 10: The Garden of Perpetual Dawn. In the space between the last dream and the first moment of waking, Lin found themselves suspended in a realm that existed at the eternal cusp of day and night, where the darkness of deep rest met the light of returning consciousness in perfect balance. This was the Garden of Perpetual Dawn, where every awakening was both an ending and a beginning, where the completion of one cycle of understanding prepared the soil for new seeds of wisdom to take root. The garden existed in colors that had no names in earthly languages, hues that were simultaneously gold and silver, rose and pearl, sapphire and emerald. But somehow more than any combination of these familiar shades, the light here was not the light of sun or moon, but the luminosity of consciousness itself becoming aware of its own nature, gentle enough to ease the transition from dream to waking, bright enough to illuminate the pathway between worlds. Lin walked through this liminal garden with the fluid grace of one who had learned to move in harmony with the natural rhythms of existence. Their every step was a meditation, their every breath a prayer of gratitude for the journey that was both ending and just beginning. The transformation that had been building throughout their celestial travels was now complete, integrated so thoroughly into their being that they could no longer remember what it felt like to be the restless seeker who had begun this journey. At the center of the garden grew a tree that was simultaneously all the trees they had encountered on their path. The wise old tree under which they had first spoken their weariness, the tree of original peace in Nuwa's garden, the immortal peach trees of son Wukong's orchard, the knowledge trees of Laozi's library. This was the tree of eternal awakening, whose roots reached into every moment of forgetting, whose branches held every instant of remembering, whose fruit was the sweet recognition that seeking and finding were always happening simultaneously in the eternal now. Beneath this tree, arranged in a perfect circle, sat all the beings who had guided Lin's journey. But now they were revealed in their true nature, not as separate teachers, but as facets of Lin's own awakened consciousness, not as external guides, but as aspects of the infinite wisdom that had been drawing them home to themselves all along. The Dragon Kings flowed together like streams converging into a great river of peace, their individual qualities merging into the unified understanding that all healing comes from learning to flow with rather than against the current of existence. Nuwa sat weaving new patterns of possibility in the air, her creative power revealed as Lin's own capacity to heal and transform and nurture growth in themselves and others. Son Wukong bounced playfully from branch to branch of the great tree, his immortal joy showing itself as Lin's own rediscovered ability to find delight in the simple fact of existence, to play with life rather than struggle against it, to approach each moment with the fresh eyes of eternal youth. The Jade Emperor rested in perfect stillness at the base of the tree, his cosmic authority revealed as Lin's own capacity to remain centered and peaceful regardless of external circumstances. To lead by example rather than force. To govern their own inner kingdom with wisdom and compassion. Chang'e glowed with the silver light of perfect contentment, her luminous solitude showing itself as Lin's own ability to be complete in themselves, to find richness in simplicity, to offer genuine presence to others because they no longer needed anything from them. Laozi smiled with the gentle humor of one who had seen through all complexity to the elegant simplicity that underlies existence. His wisdom revealed as Lin's own recognition that the most profound truths are also the most natural. The most powerful practices are also the most effortless, and Guanyin encompassed them all with her infinite compassion, her presence showing Lin that their transformed state was not a personal achievement, but a gift to be shared, not a destination to protect, but a source of blessing for all beings still caught in the dream of separation and struggle. The dawn comes, all the guides said in unison, their voices harmonizing into a sound like the universe itself, taking its first breath of a new day. It is time for you to carry the light you have discovered back into the realm, where other souls still search for what you have found, still seek for what you have become, still journey toward what you now know they already are. As they spoke, the garden began to grow brighter, not with harsh light that demanded attention, but with the gentle radiance of awareness becoming conscious of itself. Lin felt themselves beginning to dissolve, not disappearing, but expanding, not ending, but transforming into something vast enough to contain both the world of dreams and the world of waking, both the realms of seeking and the recognition of what was never lost. You will return to your familiar room, the guides continued, to your ordinary bed, to your regular life, but you will never again be ordinary, because you will carry within you the recognition that no life is ordinary, no moment is common, no being is separate from the source of all peace and joy and wisdom. Lin felt the truth of these words settling into every cell of their being, becoming not just a mental understanding, but a cellular knowing, a truth written into their very DNA, a reality that would express itself through their presence rather than their words, their being rather than their doing. The gift you have received, the unified voice of guidance went on, is not yours to keep, but yours to embody. Every person who encounters your peace will remember something about their own peaceful nature. Every being who experiences your joy will reconnect with their own capacity for delight. Every soul who feels your compassion will be reminded of the love that is their deepest essence. As the dawn light grew stronger, Lin began to see through the garden to glimpses of their familiar world, their room, their bed, their life waiting to be lived from this new understanding. But instead of feeling sadness at leaving the celestial realms behind, they felt only excitement at the opportunity to explore how the ordinary world looked when seen through eyes that had remembered their true nature. "This is not goodbye," the guides said. And now Lin could hear that their voices were coming from within their own heart. "Because you are taking us with you, we were never separate from you. We are the wisdom you were born with, temporarily projected outward, so that you could explore it, appreciate it, and finally reclaim it as your natural inheritance." The tree of eternal awakening began to release its fruit, not physical objects, but seeds of understanding that dissolved into Lin's consciousness, taking root there as permanent reminders of what they had learned and become. Each seed carried the complete essence of one of the realms they had visited, ensuring that they could return to any of these states of consciousness simply by remembering what was now inseparable from their being. "Rest is no longer something you need to find," the guides continued, "because you have become rest itself. Peace is no longer something you need to achieve, because you have recognized yourself as peace in temporary disguise. Joy is no longer something you need to pursue, because you embody the joy that the universe feels in experiencing itself through infinite forms." As these final teachings were spoken, the garden began to fade around the edges, not disappearing, but becoming translucent, revealing itself as a structure of consciousness rather than a place that existed independently. Lin understood that they could return here anytime simply by remembering the truth of what they were, simply by relaxing into the peace that was their natural state, simply by recognizing that every moment contained the possibility of awakening. "Sleep now," the guides whispered, and their voices were the sound of every force in the universe conspiring to support the return of awakened consciousness to the world of form. "Let your final dreams be bridges between what you have discovered and how you will live it, between the wisdom you have gained and the love you will share." Lin felt themselves being gently carried on currents of pure blessing, their consciousness being prepared for the transition back to ordinary awareness in the most gentle and supportive way possible. The last thing they experienced in the Garden of Perpetual Dawn was a sensation of infinite gratitude, not just their gratitude for the journey, but the universe's gratitude for the opportunity to know itself more completely through their awakening. In their final celestial dream, Lin experienced themselves as a bridge between worlds, a living doorway through which other beings could glimpse the peace that was possible, a gentle reminder that the search for fulfillment could end in the recognition that what was sought was never absent. They felt themselves becoming an instrument through which the cosmos could express its infinite love for all beings still caught in the beautiful but temporary illusion of separation and struggle. When they would wake, it would be to discover that their ordinary life had become extraordinary, not because anything external had changed, but because the one who lived it had remembered their true nature. They would find that rest came as naturally as breathing. That peace was their default state. That joy bubbled up spontaneously from the recognition that existence itself was an infinite gift, expressing itself through the temporary form of their individual awareness. The dawn was coming, and with it, the return to a world that desperately needed the reminder that peace was possible. That rest was natural, that the journey home to one's true nature was always available to anyone willing to stop struggling long enough to recognize what had never actually been lost. Epilogue: the return to sacred ordinary. Lin awakened in their own bed, in their own room, in the same small house at the edge of the village where their journey had begun. The morning light filtered through familiar curtains, casting the same patterns on the wooden floor that they had seen countless times before. Everything appeared exactly as it had when they first lay down to sleep, seeking relief from the chronic tiredness that had driven them to the hilltop temple what seemed like lifetimes ago. Yet, everything had changed completely. The awakening came not as the jarring transition from unconsciousness to activity that they had known for years, but as a gentle flowering of awareness, like a lotus opening its petals to receive the first rays of dawn. Their body rested in the bed with perfect comfort, completely relaxed, yet vibrantly alive. Every cell humming with the quiet contentment of a being who had finally remembered how to exist in harmony with their own nature. The tiredness that had plagued them for so long was gone, not temporarily relieved, but transformed at its very root. In its place was a quality of aliveness that was both deeply restful and inexhaustibly vibrant, like a still lake that reflected infinite sky while remaining perfectly tranquil in its depths. They understood now that what they had called tiredness had never been a physical problem requiring a physical solution, but a spiritual homesickness that could only be healed by the recognition of their true home in the eternal peace of their own being. Rising from bed felt like dancing with gravity rather than fighting against it, their movements flowing with the same natural grace they had learned in the celestial realms. As they walked to the window, their feet touched the floor with the reverence of one who knew that every surface was sacred, every step an opportunity to practice the art of moving through existence as a meditation rather than a struggle. Outside, the village was awakening to what appeared to be an ordinary day. Vendors were setting up their stalls in the market square. Children were walking to school with their wooden tablets and brushes. Elderly men were gathering in the tea houses to discuss the affairs of the world. But Lin's transformed vision revealed the extraordinary nature of these seemingly mundane activities. Each vendor arranging their wares was participating in the cosmic dance of creation and sharing. Their simple act of offering sustenance to their neighbors, an expression of the same principle that moved stars in their courses and caused flowers to bloom. Each child walking to school carried within them the same infinite potential that Lin had discovered in the celestial realms. Their laughter and curiosity manifestations of the joy that was the universe delighting in exploring itself through young minds. The elderly men in the tea houses were unconsciously practicing the same contemplative presence that Lin had learned from Chang'e and Laozi. Their quiet conversations and shared silences, creating ripples of peace that spread far beyond the walls of their gathering places. Lin, dressed in their ordinary clothes, prepared their simple breakfast and began their daily routines. But everything was infused with the recognition that there was nothing ordinary about any of it. Washing their face became a ritual of renewal, as sacred as any ceremony in the Jade Emperor's court. Brewing tea became a meditation on transformation, as profound as watching Nuwa reshape the very foundations of reality. Even the simple act of breathing was revealed as participation in the eternal circulation of life force that connected them to every being in existence. As they stepped outside their door, Lin felt the subtle but unmistakable shift that their presence created in the world around them. People who encountered them on the street found themselves pausing slightly, taking deeper breaths, remembering for just a moment something they couldn't quite name, but that felt like coming home. Children were drawn to them with the instinctive recognition that souls have for other souls who have remembered their true nature. The old woman who sold vegetables in the market square looked up from her scales and smiled with unusual warmth when Lin approached her stall. "You look different today," she said, her weathered face crinkling with curiosity. "More peaceful. Have you been sleeping better?" Lin smiled, understanding that this question was the universe's way of creating an opportunity for the peace they had discovered to touch another seeking soul. "I've learned that sleep is not just rest for the body," they replied gently, "but an opportunity for the spirit to remember what it never actually forgot." The vegetable seller nodded slowly, as if these words awakened an echo of something she had always known, but never quite been able to articulate. As Lin continued through the market, they noticed that their simple presence seemed to remind people of their own capacity for contentment, their own connection to the peace that was always available beneath the surface of their daily concerns. At the temple on the hilltop where their journey had begun, Lin found the same weathered steps, the same guardian lions, the same ancient trees. But now they could see the streams of golden light that flowed from this sacred place, connecting it to temples and sacred sites throughout the world. All of them part of a vast network of peace that existed for any soul ready to remember their true home, sitting on the temple steps where they had first voiced their weariness to the night sky. Lin felt the completion of the great circle their journey had traced. They understood now that they had never actually left this spot. Their entire celestial adventure had taken place in the space between one breath and the next, in the infinite realm that existed within their own consciousness. The Dragon King's depths, Nuwa's garden, Sun Wukong's orchard, the Jade Emperor's court, Chang'e's valley, Laozi's library, Guanyin's temple, all of it lived within them now as dimensions of their own awakened awareness. The temple bells began to ring, calling the faithful to evening prayers, and Lin realized that the entire day had passed without their notice. So absorbed had they been in the simple miracle of living as an awakened being in an ordinary world. But this was not the unconscious passage of time that comes from distraction or busy activity. This was the timeless quality that emerges when one is so present to each moment that hours pass like minutes, so aligned with the flow of existence that they become the flow itself. As the stars emerged in the darkening sky, Lin felt themselves connected to every other being throughout the cosmos who had made this same journey from seeking to finding, from restlessness to peace, from the illusion of separation to the recognition of their eternal unity with the source of all existence. They were part of an invisible network of awakened souls, each one a point of light in the vast web of consciousness that was slowly but inevitably awakening to its own true nature. The moon rose, full and luminous, casting the same silver light that had blessed their time in Chang'e's valley. But now Lin understood that this light was not separate from them. They were expressions of the same luminous awareness that poured through the moon, through the stars, through every conscious being that had ever drawn breath or would ever exist. A gentle breeze stirred the temple grounds, carrying with it the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the distant sound of the village settling into sleep. Lin closed their eyes and felt themselves expanding to encompass the entire scene: the temple, the village, the hills, the sky, the cosmos itself. They were not losing their individual identity, but discovering that their true identity was vast enough to include everything, while remaining intimately personal, infinite enough to embrace all existence, while remaining as close as their own heartbeat. In this moment of perfect integration, Lin understood the ultimate secret that their journey had been designed to reveal. There had never been anywhere to go because they had never actually left home. There had never been anything to achieve because they had always been complete. There had never been any problem to solve because the one who seemed to have problems was itself a temporary story told by the one consciousness that was eternally free of all problems. The peace they had sought in the depths of the Dragon King's realm was the peace of their own natural state. The healing they had received from Nuwa was the healing that happened when they stopped fighting their own nature. The joy they had discovered with Sun Wukong was the joy that their essence felt in simply existing. The authority they had witnessed in the Jade Emperor was their own capacity to remain centered in the truth of what they were. The contentment they had found with Chang'e was the satisfaction that came from recognizing their own completeness. The wisdom they had received from Laozi was their own inner knowing finally trusted and followed. The compassion they had experienced with Guanyin was their own love for all beings finally recognized and expressed. As this understanding settled into every level of their being, Lin felt a profound shift in their relationship to sleep itself. No longer was sleep an escape from the difficulties of waking life. No longer was it simply the body's recovery from the day's exertions. Sleep had been revealed as a sacred state, a nightly opportunity to rest so completely in their true nature that they awakened each morning more aligned with who they really were. They understood now that every night's sleep was a mini journey back to the source. Every dream an exploration of consciousness at play. Every awakening a fresh opportunity to embody the peace they had discovered. The boundary between sleeping and waking had dissolved into the recognition that they were always resting in the eternal awareness that dreamed all dreams and awakened in all awakenings. Rising from the temple steps, Lin walked slowly back toward the village, their movements a walking meditation on the mystery of being simultaneously human and divine, individual and universal, temporal and eternal. Each step was a prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought them home to themselves. Each breath an affirmation of their commitment to live as a bridge between the worlds of seeking and finding. In their home, Lin prepared for sleep with the reverence of one who knew they were about to embark on another sacred journey. But unlike the restless, weary soul who had first sought peace in these same rooms, they approached their bed with anticipation rather than exhaustion, with curiosity rather than desperation. Lying down, they felt their body settling into the bedding with the same perfect comfort they had experienced in every sacred realm they had visited. The mattress became as supportive as the Dragon King's flowing waters, the pillow as soft as the cloud chairs in the Jade Emperor's court. the blankets as warming as the healing light in Nuwa's garden. As sleep approached, Lin felt themselves being visited by each of their celestial guides one final time, not as external beings, but as the wisdom qualities that had been awakened within them and would now guide their every dream and every waking moment. The Dragon Kings flowed through their bloodstream as natural tranquility. Nuwa worked through their cellular processes as spontaneous healing. Sun Wukong danced through their nervous system as irrepressible joy. The Jade Emperor sat in their heart as unshakable peace. Chang'e glowed in their consciousness as luminous contentment. Laozi whispered in their mind as elegant simplicity, and Guanyin embraced their entire being as infinite compassion for all existence. Sleep came like a beloved friend, welcoming them home. And Lin's last conscious thought was a recognition that their journey was both complete and just beginning. Complete in the sense that they had found what they were looking for. Just beginning in the sense that they now had eternity to explore the infinite depths and heights and breadths of the peace they had discovered in their dreams that night. And every night thereafter, Lin would return to the celestial realms not as a seeker, but as a native, exploring ever deeper dimensions of the peace that was their true home. But more importantly, they would awaken each morning more firmly established in the recognition that these realms existed within them, accessible at any moment through the simple practice of remembering what they really were beneath all the temporary stories of seeking and struggle. The transformation was complete, but it was also eternal, a process of continuous deepening into peace that would never end because peace had no bottom, no boundaries, no limits. Lin had become a living invitation for every other being still caught in the dream of separation to remember their own true nature. A gentle reminder that the peace everyone was seeking was not distant or difficult to find, but as close as their own breath, as intimate as their own heartbeat, as available as their own willingness to stop struggling long enough to recognize what had never actually been lost. The village slept around them, and the world continued its ancient dance of consciousness, forgetting and remembering itself through countless forms. But now there was one more being on earth who had awakened from the dream of separation. One more point of light in the growing network of souls who had discovered their true nature. One more peaceful presence reminding the universe that the return home was always possible, always supported, always just one moment of honest recognition away. In the eternal now that embraced all sleeping and all waking, all seeking and all finding, all journeys and all homecomings, Lin rested in the infinite peace that was their nature, their source, their destination, and their eternal home. The great circle was complete, and it was perfect, and it had always been perfect, and it would always be perfect, world without end. In the endless dance of consciousness, exploring its own infinite nature through the beautiful play of dreams and awakening, rest and activity, forgetting and remembering the one truth that made all other truths possible. That peace was not something to be found, but something to be remembered, not something to be achieved, but something to be returned to, not something distant and difficult, but something as intimate and immediate as the awareness in which all experiences arose, and into which they would all eventually dissolve, leaving only the eternal rest that was the source and destination of every journey that had ever been taken, or ever would be taken in the infinite exploration of consciousness, knowing itself through infinite forms of love. And so the story comes full circle, ending where it began, but transformed by the journey, carrying within it the seed of every reader's own potential, awakening to the peace that is their birthright, the rest that is their nature, the love that is their deepest truth. May all beings find the peace that Lin discovered. May all beings remember their true home. May all beings rest in the infinite love that is the source of all existence and the destination of every heart that has ever yearned for something it could not name, but knew it would recognize when it was finally found.